Hello everybody, and welcome to another At the Foot of Lead Mountain video. This video is going to be slightly different in that whilst I will show you what's in my pre-World War II 15mm pile of shame or lead mountain, what I also wanted to do was use this as an opportunity to talk about how I go about collecting armies. So in the past I've said that I typically paint whatever I feel like painting at a given moment, so if I look across my painting desk and nothing's really catching my eye and I don't really feel like painting whatever's there, I'll typically say, you know what, forget about it and go grab something that I do feel like painting and paint to that, because I don't really have any painting pressures that are being applied to me. So in other words, I don't have a project that has to get done for a convention or for a tournament or anything like that. So with that said, you might say, well, in that case, do I just collect things blindly and just do what I feel like and hope for the best? Well, the answer is no, because there are certain limitations that I feel that we have to place upon ourselves as gamers in recognizing that you need to paint things which are going to be useful. Again, assuming you're painting to game, right? If you're painting to collect just for the visuals, then that's fine, you do what you want, right? But in our case, for those of us who do play the game, who play games rather, we typically want to collect with a vision in the end as to how we're going to play the game. Now, the thing that brought this to mind was one of Ralph Astley's videos, as is so often the case, which he published some time ago, and I've watched it then, and I watched it again recently because I remembered watching it and thinking I wanted to talk about it. And in it, he was talking about skirmish gaming and his frustration with skirmish gaming, and I think that I share a lot of his frustrations. And there's something he touched upon early on in his video, which he said that, and I think I'll rephrase it in my own words, but just know that it's inspired by what he said. The problem with wargaming is that we typically want to play Waterloo or the big battles, right? We want something that looks stunning on the tabletop. We want it to be sweeping and grand. The reality, on the other hand, is that we are painting piece by piece, and it'll be a very long time from when we start the project to that final gratification of putting on Waterloo, as an example. And that puts certain limitations on us, right? So what we typically do is we tell ourselves, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll paint an infantry battalion, or maybe 2 infantry battalia. Then I'll do a commander for that group, for that division or brigade or whatever it is. And then I'll do maybe an artillery piece to go with it, and I'll do a unit of cavalry. And in doing so, we're trying to keep things fresh, right? We're trying to make sure that we're not getting bored. We also don't feel that the goal is unattainable. But the reality of this is like this. Like, if we look at, this is Napoleonic Principles of War. If we look at, say, let's find something kind of more in my 1809 range that I'm interested in. Here we go. So this is 1809. Let's look for the Austrians, because that's who I care about. That's French corps, Bavarians, Saxons, French additional troops. Here we go, Austrian 1809. Okay, so what this rule set does quite well, actually, this is Napoleonic Principles of War, and it does something quite interesting in that it provides you, obviously if you want to play a historical scenario, you would just get the order of battle for that scenario and then you play the game. But what this does is it provides you with generic army lists, so you could play a sort of pickup game or a sort of tournament if you wanted to. And what it does is it gives you relatively generic divisional breakdowns per for these various armies, right? So this is an Austrian 1809 army. It tells you that this quality of your commander-in-chief. You've got your first division, which has artillery attached to it, and then you have 5-line infantry battalions or regiments or whatever this breakdown is in terms of the rules. Then you have a second division that is a poor leader with 1 attached artillery, again medium, and then you have 4-line, and then here you have an advanced guard who has a commander, obviously, and then you have light horse artillery, 2 light infantry, and 2 hussars. Okay, and then it says you can pick up to 24 points from the other side of the page, which is the sort of more optional stuff. And again, you can choose there between a reserve infantry. I'll show you actually. Let me move the page across. You can choose between reserve infantry, which is basically grenadiers, reserve heavy cavalry, reserve light cavalry division, infantry division, or reserve artillery, which is down here. Now, the point I'm trying to make is this. realistically, if you wanted to play a game of this, of Napoleonic Principles of War, you need to collect this as a base, and then you need to collect another 24 points at least from the other side, right? And the problem here is that you're being forced into collecting certain things. So realistically, painting up 2 battalions of infantry and then an artillery brigade is a great start, because it gets you halfway towards your 1st infantry division. But then painting up a cavalry unit doesn't really gain you anything in that division, right? Because divisions weren't built that way. And so I think the point Ralph made, which was quite good, is in a game like Sharp Practice 2, for instance, where there is the sort of hybrid between units and individuality that people want. It encourages us to say, okay, well, I'll have a couple of units or groups of infantry, and then I'll have an artillery piece, and then I'll have some hussars, and that's my force. But in reality, that composition just does not exist in the real world. And if we were to zoom in on any point of the battlefield, at say again Waterloo, it's unlikely that you're going to see that kind of conglomeration of troops on either side. I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying it's highly unlikely. You know, you don't, the way that armies are structured in this period, with communications being the way they are, you can't just be a local commander and like grab an artillery piece from over there and grab some cavalry from over there and grab a few infanteers from over here and be like, come on lads, let's form an ad hoc unit and go take that farmhouse. It isn't. I don't think it's really how things happened. But again, I only know what I know, so I'm not going to fight with you if that's how you think it happened. And my point being is that I think that skirmish gaming should really be quite generic. I think if you're going to play a skirmish game, it needs to be more in the spirit of like a Western skirmish game where everybody's kind of the same. Or if you wanted to play something in like the Napoleonic period, it would be you know, grenadiers taking a farmhouse from say a French voltigeur unit, and that would be all there is. There wouldn't be an artillery piece hanging around just providing some cover fire or some suppressing fire for the grenadiers as they advance. That just kind of does not work for me, really. But of course, that's not what people want in a skirmish game. What they want is really not a skirmish game, but they want a sort of like hybrid chimera game, which allows them to take the pieces of this that they're collecting and still play it at a scale which is relatively unrealistic. And again, it's fine. If it's only a game, that's grand. It's just not what I want from a skirmish game. So, and again, with that said, what I want to talk about in this video is really how we collect armies. So when I look at a list like this, it tells me you've got to collect this, 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 and this to meet the requirements for this division. And so one thing I do to myself is I always have a sense of roughly where I'm going. So I might collect 2 units of line infantry and an artillery piece or battery or whatever, and then I might do the horse anyway, right? Because I know that in the end I'm aiming for this whole collection here, so I don't really care. And they don't have to be done discreetly, but what I do have to bear in mind is the fact that in the end, when it shakes out, I'd like to roughly conform to these shapes here, right? So this informs a lot of how I collect. So I'll put the Napoleonic book away right now, because I've spoken about what I wanted to talk about there, which is the idea that armies typically were not just thrown together from whatever was lying around, and we have to sort of apply some guards around, what's the word I'm looking for, some kind of shape or form around what we're collecting, lest it just be a total mess. And I think one of the ways that this is evidenced, if you will, is the fact that almost, well, I'm not saying everyone I know, but there's a very high occurrence of people collecting French Napoleonics and choosing as their first unit Old Guard Grenadiers. I know I did it, right? Because you want guys in bearskins, you want guys who look really sharp and are elite and so on. But the reality is that having that unit painted up is of very little real value, initially at least, because it doesn't form a core part of any French army. So I think that's why I tend to apply these breaks on myself as it goes. So you see here before you 2 things: DBA, which will be really relevant in this video, and DBM. And so when I started collecting ancients rather, what I did was I always started off with a baseline of a DBA army, because it was small. You could get the army on the table pretty quickly. You only needed a base of 12 elements, right? You could buy them in packs from Essex Miniatures, which would give you your base army plus all your variations. So that was something I really liked back in the day. It was cheap. It was like, at the time, it was probably about 20 to 30 pounds per per army pack, depending again on what army you get. If you get one with a lot of figures, it would be more expensive, but you get the idea, right? The principle was you could purchase things in very small discrete modules, and then the cool thing was you could take those modules and you could expand them or multiply them, and then you would end up with something that worked with this game, right? So for instance, just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about here, in this video you will see a later Carthaginian army, right? So let's find the later Carthaginian list here. Hopefully I haven't gone too far. I think it's here somewhere. Ptolemaic. Here we go, later Carthaginian army. So what I'll do is I'll quickly zoom us in here for a little bit, just so you can see what I'm seeing. Okay. Okay, and so what the later Carthaginian list does is it tells you a date range, it tells you the type of terrain you fight on, their aggression level, and then who their enemies are, and potentially who their allies are. And then a reference book, which is a Phil Barker published book. Now, in this list, you can then see, okay, well, you want cavalry as a general, light horse, you get 3 units of 4 spearmen. You get, let me not point with my finger, how about I point with a pen, because that's going to be better. Alright, so you get 3 cavalry, right, as your general. You get 2 light horse, which is Numidian cavalry presumably, because that's typically what the Carthaginians use. Then you get 3 times 4 spear, so that's 3 spearman units, which again typically is Libby Phoenician spear. Then you get 1 3/4 auxilia, and these represent Carthaginian citizen spearmen, or something like that, or auxiliary kind of spearmen types, but who are less well armored spearmen. Then you get 3 warbands, or psiloi, if you're English, I guess. These can represent Gallic mercenaries, or alternatively these could represent Numidian spear throwers, like javelinmen. Sorry. Elephant, you can choose between an elephant or a unit of cavalry, an elephant or 2 light horse, and then 2 units of psiloi. Right, now, when I collected this army, which you'll see in a moment, I didn't consider at all for a moment getting the DBA list. I bought the ready-made army pack from Essex, and it came, and it was roughly formed around building a later Carthaginian list from DBM, which was slightly different. So in other words, it dispensed with a warband unit. Instead it focused on giving you the cavalry you needed, the Libby Phoenician cavalry you needed, the Numidian mercenary cavalry you needed, the Phoenician citizen infantry, Libyan spearmen, various skirmishing javelinmen, usually Numidians again. You didn't get a bolt thrower, you didn't get ditches and palisades and all this fancy stuff. And then you came with a general and so on. But then the principle was that you can see here that there's the option to add in like mercenary Greeks and so on and so forth. So what I did to do that was, again, keeping in mind wanting to be able to play with whatever I had available, you know, with my friends and so on, or even play like a Carthaginian army against, say, Greeks, would be to choose the Greek army that would have been an ally, and then you can create those conflicts there. So as you're collecting the DBA armies, you're actually adding to your larger force, but in the meantime, while you're still collecting the DBA armies, you can play them against each other. And so that's how I came about to this mechanism. Now in this video I'm not going to show you the painted figures I have, because this is about what's in the Lead Mountain, but what I want you to understand is that the genesis of how this army was purchased was based upon this idea of modules building into forces, right? Okay, so we'll start with the Carthaginian stuff, because we were talking about that, right? And in this box you can see there are several little baggies. Now some of these were ones that came from Essex the way they are. Other ones I've actually added in after the fact, and I've labelled them with what they are. So this is something I've been doing. This is 17 Greek Essex hoplites, so I know these are Greeks. And you can see there's some Greek cav in here, in this bag. Phoenician cavalry here. More Phoenician cavalry here. Numidian cavalry. Let me get the rocks out of the way. Some Libyan spear, Libby Phoenician spear. Let me zoom out so you can see what I'm doing here. A command base, so that's likely going to be general. Some Greek Theriophori. These Theriophori, they are obviously part of the Greek part of the force, so I'll put them there with the Greek stuff. Greek mercenaries, these are hoplites, so they go in the hoplite pile, in the Greek pile. More Greek mercenaries, they go in the pile. More Libyan spear, so they go there. Libyan spear, you're seeing a theme here. More Libyan spear, Phoenician spearmen, right? Which these are those ones that I mentioned earlier would be like auxilia, or they would be called up in a pinch rather than be standard part of the army, right? Elephant, can never leave home without the elephants. More Phoenician spear, so they go over here. Numidian, these just means horses, right? So we put them in the pile with the Numidian stuff. Another elephant here, put the elephant there, and another Numidian pile over here. And then the other thing that's left in this box is a couple of odds and sods. These are actually Greeks. These are Psili, like peltasts, and some Cretan archers and stuff. And you can see this is a hoplite there. So I'll just put that to one side. So, alright, so the principle here, what I did was I purchased the starter box, which was DBM based for the Carthaginians, because I knew I wanted a later Carthaginian army, and that was the best value for money. And from those pieces, I could compose a DBA army, which I have, actually, but you'll see that in the finished army video that I do, which will have to follow this. But basically, you then end up with all the other bits and bobs that you use to create the army, yeah? So you've got your Phoenician cavalry here, Numidians, Libyan spear, Phoenician spearmen, elephants, and then the command. Now, what's cool is you can then bolt on other pieces, as I mentioned. So this is the Carthaginian pieces, right? Which I'll remove the strictly Carthaginian stuff, which is all of this, okay? And that goes back in the box, all right? So we're left with some Numidian stuff, and we're left with some Greek stuff. Now, we talked about the Greek stuff briefly already. We said that this was a actual Greek, later hoplite Greek army, DBA army that I purchased, with a view to it being bolted onto the Carthaginian army, potentially also being the opponent of the Carthaginians in Sicily. But also it's always handy to have a Greek hoplite army, right? Because they're relatively useful across period, since they were involved in most conflicts because of the Greek colonial project all over the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. So really handy army to have. So this was a DBA army. Some of the components are not here right now because they've already been painted, and you'll see that in another video. But then we can put these away as well. So this is a Greek component. Now, what I also wanted to do at the time was I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to have more Numidians? Because the Numidians are pretty big players in the Punic Wars period. So I bought this Numidian. This is still the original packing note that came with it. This is from Essex. The Numidian or early Moorish 215 BC to 25 AD. And you can see here that you get cavalry. These are the number of figures, by the way. Your cavalry general, your light horse general, because you can choose between the two. Tons of light horse, tons of javelin throwers. You get guys who are meant to be used as auxiliaries, or auxilia. You get an elephant, and you also get 4 blade troops. These are your imitation legions, right? So that's what's in this bag here. So let's empty this out, and we can quickly see that we've got here some more. This is armored cavalry. The guys are wearing cuirasses, so we'll put them over there. Then here we start seeing light horse. Okay, these are javelin-y types, guys with javelins. Here are your imitation legionaries. You can see them with chainmail hauberks and a scutum, and they've got a pilum. So they look like Marian Romans to me, but a really good, cool look actually. Then you've got some slingers, which would be psili or psiloi if you're English. Then light horse here, the elephant, some bowmen as well, which you can use as your skirmishers. And then the theory, of course, being that these spear and shield armed javelin-y types would actually end up being your Numidian auxilia. So this is a more formed body of troops, presumably still skirmishing. They're not quite heavy infantry, right? And then this is a unit of light horse general. So he actually looks like a Samnite or some sort of early Roman hill tribe leader or something. We'll put him over there. Right, so what I'm trying to explain here is that I bought the Carthaginians. That was a huge bite of the apple, right? So what I did was initially I focused on painting the DBA portion of the army. The rest I left, right, because it wasn't a priority. Then I started painting up parts of the Greek army, right, because good piece to have. And then this is a sort of another piece that I can bolt on, Numidian piece, and they can be enemies of Rome, allies of Rome, allies of Carthage, enemies of Carthage, and they're a fun army that stands on their own. So now this is the pile, and this is one I'm looking forward to painting. And you'll have seen recently I posted a video about how I painted my my Libyan skirmishers for the Carthaginians in 15mm, and that I really enjoyed doing that. And I'm glad that I did. It was a really cool little project to do on a weekend, to just get something done that looked pretty cool and tied in nicely to the rest of the army. And when you'll see, when I show you the rest of my 15mm collection as it stands currently in another video, then you'll understand just quite how satisfying 15mm can be. I think 15mm gets knocked a lot because it's compromised between the sort of bulk look of say 10 and 6mm, but it has quite a high degree of detail, or it can at any rate, and so people find it frustrating because you don't want to use your 25mm painting skills on it, but you also don't want to have them look like rubbish. So there's a slight problem there, right? Right, and then I was talking about DBA and earlier, and about how it really got me into historical gaming, and this is a real key example of the benefits and pitfalls of DBA. So when I discovered Essex Miniatures, a friend of mine who was also into historical gaming, but he and I were kind of stuck playing Warhammer because that's what the club played, right? Once we discovered these DBA packs, we went hog wild, right? And we bought like armies for periods, and we typically buy matched armies. So if he was doing, say he was doing Gallic, I would get Romans to fight them or whatever. Point was that there were some occasions, however, where each of us would purchase a matched pair of armies and paint them up, because they'd look consistent on the tabletop, because the painting style would be the same. But also, like, maybe I'm not interested in a particular piece of history when he was. So he did a lot of Dark Age stuff, which I wasn't particularly interested in. At the time, I actually collected a War of the Roses Yorkist army, and looking at their armies and enemies there, I found that there was a French Ordnance army which I could use against them. So I actually bought that pack, having absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into. So you can see here the half-assed attempts at, or at any rate, the start that I made, shall we say, to this Ordnance army, right? So there's like an artillery piece here and so on. So I never really got going with this. You can see there's some painted pieces like this crossbowman here. He was done. I did him in blue because I figured the French would wear blue. I don't know if that's historically true or not. I don't think it really matters. But what I did was I bought this pack kind of without really thinking about it, and ended up with this very gendarme heavy army, which is slightly problematic because it's going to be a pain in the butt to paint. However, I'm not going to get rid of this. I think as a piece of history and reminding me where I come from, it's something that means something to me. I don't imagine it should mean anything to anyone else. But yeah, you can see here that there's lots of like very, very like late medieval sort of knights here, very beautifully panoplied. You know, like there's this general figure here with his sort of marshal's baton, I guess, or whatever. And there's the crossbowmen, and you know the knights would look really cool. So, and then there's an artillery piece, which was quite the fun little addition. Now the War of the Roses army, sadly, I sold many years ago, and I'd forgotten I'd sold it. And so as I was going through all this stuff, I was like, man, where is that Yorkist army? I know I have it here somewhere, because it looked really good. Like it had banners and all sorts. I really went ham on it. It looked so cool. Turns out I'd sold the thing on eBay many years ago, and I don't think I'll ever do that again. I know that people say that, but I've always regretted everything I've sold on eBay. I've always thought to myself afterwards, oh, I really wish I'd kept that, right? Because I didn't buy the stuff to paint and sell it. It wasn't like I had a financial view to do that. So I always feel kind of a bit sad about the fact that I got rid of those troops, which would have been a nice matchup for this army. But anyway, so this is the French Ordnance, and like I said, this is quite an interesting little project. I don't know anything about them as such, or how to paint them or anything. I kind of just guessed a little, but I think with that said, were I to start painting these up today, I would probably put a bit more effort in and figure out exactly what I would be aiming to do here. But you know, I will say that since the early 2000s, the internet's become a lot more rich in data like that. So there are a lot more hobby blogs, and you can find what you need from those blogs as to like how to paint stuff. So that's really handy. And who knows, this might be a project where you finish it and you say, okay, cool, it's a DBA army, and that's all it will ever be. And then you never know. You might think, oh, actually, I'd like to kind of expand it, and wouldn't it be cool to do that? And again, you've got the building block here, so you've got something you can play with initially. It's done, and then if you add on to that, you're just growing the scale of the game that you're playing. So, you know, as I said, in terms of how you collect armies, I think this is a smart way to work. Right, so the last bit of my 15mm pile, or box, is this Haribo box, 15mm on the side, as you can see. Here are some AB Prussians, which are actually 18mm, I think. Now, this comes from a project where I bought a battalion pack of AB miniatures Prussians, and I painted them up and then sold them on eBay, but that was the purpose of purchasing them. At the time, I was curious to see if it was financially viable to do that. The answer is no. I don't think it's financially viable to paint miniatures for money. I think if you're doing it and then you're selling stuff because you think, oh well, I've just done it now, but I'm never going to use it, whatever, that's a different thing. But I think buying packs and selling them painted is not a good value proposition. This was also my first tussle with 18mm AB Napoleonics, and they are really nice figures. They are phenomenal. You might even see there's a painted one here. I think he was a leftover from the battalion. The other problem, of course, with selling painted figures on eBay is that it's very difficult to preempt what basing people want or how many figures they actually want. So you kind of have to guess, and then that causes problems of its own. But I mean, you can see these are beautiful figures. I don't know if the focus is really catching it, but here you go. There you go. So really nice miniatures, actually, really great detail. They're a little bit more expensive, 15mm than most, and if I were collecting Napoleonics in 15/18mm, this is what I would definitely get. Really nice miniatures. But they're just, again, that's a little anecdotal story there. Now, here we go. The other thing that I collected in 15mm that I really wanted was a Fire and Fury army. Now, what I had done is, I had gotten, and I don't know where, or maybe it was in eBay or something, but I had this Union army that I had, I think I purchased on eBay. It was awfully painted, but I got this, these are some sort of Middle Eastern guys carrying carpets. I don't know what that's all about. This is why we do these videos, right? Anyway, so I really wanted to do a ACW army, American Civil War, and I wanted to do it in 15mm because at the time I was attending Milton Keynes War Games Club, very briefly actually, and I saw a game of Fire and Fury one day, and I thought, this is the game right here, this is awesome. I have the rule book. It's a stunning, I think it's a great rule set. It's been around forever, which is kind of testament to its quality, I think, in that longevity. And I bought a pack again from Essex Miniatures because they were my go-to people for 15mm. And I purchased like generals, and it was an army pack you could purchase, and you know you would get like a bunch of like commanders and such. Then what I've done is I've actually, these codes are the original Essex codes, and then I've actually just labelled them as to what they are. So these are like dismounted cavalry. I think these are just infantry if they're not labelled. And some more cavalry here, which is, you know, sad really, because we don't use as much cavalry as we should. These are more loading infantry. I haven't bothered labelling them, as I said. If they're just regular infantry, I don't bother because I know what they are. Then dismounted cavalry again. An empty bag. These are actually really helpful, so I keep that to one side. More. These are like infantry command. This is foot command again. More cavalry. That's a lot of cavalry, isn't it? These are some casualty figures. I think I just bought this pack on a whim, really, because you know I like little pieces like that. More cavalry. These are actually, I think this is a limber. Yep, this is a limber. You can see there it's got the gun carriage and all, so that's pretty cool. Big fan of limbers. I know you don't really use them, but they look great on the table, right? More cavalry. I don't know why it came with so much cavalry. Yep, more cavalry again. These look like standing horses, so this is a horse holder, which I've marked as such, horse holder for dismounted cavalry. Again, regular infantry, another gun, I think we had a gun earlier. What else have we got here? Another commander type figure, maybe Stonewall Jackson or somebody like that. Artillerymen, who go with the guns, obviously. Let's see what else we have here. This is I haven't labelled this one. It looks like, this is a horse holder again. Dismounted cavalry command this time. And then finally, at the end of it all, this is probably some kind of divisional commander or something, because it's he looks super important, and here's like an army flag. Yeah, and the commander's there on his horse. You can see him there, but it has like a army pennant. Right, so I bought this, and my goal was to do a Fire and Fury Army Confederate. I chose a Confederate spin on the army list. Never really made too much headway with it. I have painted a bunch of the infantry and based them up and everything, and they're in the display cabinet. And again, I'll show them when I show my 15mm stuff off. But this is, again, one of those projects I've always wanted to do. The problem is that as I've gotten older, I've kind of steered away from the 15mm compromise and more towards either the 6/10mm small scale stuff or the 28mm stuff. But I do think these miniatures warrant painting, and I would love to actually get them done, just for myself really. But there we go, that's the last of the 15mm stuff. So you can see here there's a lot of stuff in this box. Some of it's a little bit posh. Everything has a story, as I like to think. There's, you know, whenever I sit back and think to myself, oh, I really like to start a new project, I always think to myself, you know what, you've got all this stuff to paint, do you not perhaps feel like this? And there's some joy to be had in that, I think. So yeah, that's the 15mm pile of or lead mountain for the moment. I think you'll agree it's not as large a lead mountain as it could be, thankfully. But there's loads of work to be done, and I'm constantly going through stuff and figuring out, you know, what needs rebasing or fixing or whatever. And that's one of the things I've been kind of working on recently as I rebase my 28mm stuff. So as I see the 15mm stuff needs rebasing or finishing basing, because that's the other thing I'm really bad at. I'll finish painting everything, get it all based up, but never finish the bases, right? So that's been another positive side of this new project that I'm embarking on, which is to look at what I currently have, take stock of it, share it with you in the videos, and then understand where am I going with it, what am I going to do with it, and also, you know, what needs to be done to it to get to a point where it can actually be useful, rather than just being metal in a box somewhere, right? So that's all for now. I hope you have a good one, and hopefully I'll see you soon with a sort of showcase of the 15mm things that I've painted, and then you can laugh at me in that video too. Have a good one, and speak to you soon.